I'll call this regular council meeting of June 24th to order. Under presentations, we have none this evening. Could I have a motion, please, to adopt the agenda as presented? Should we amend it first? I guess we should. Okay, first we have an amendment. Now this went through the traffic board, then went through the police board, and as we've already talked here when the police chief was here, Paul Lattiser, we've got a grant to do half of the uncontrolled intersections within our city with the intent of doing the other half with another grant. So we understand in BC that most of those are already done. I know the police chief came from out east. All of their uncontrolled intersections are already signed. So when Paul was here that evening, we talked about that. There was no issues. So we would like to add that to the addendum. And the half that they have picked are the ones, most of the ones where all of the accidents were. They've gone back in time and they've done the worst intersections first, where the worst accidents were. So that's how they decided to do the first half. And I think, Councillor Nibbs, you had suggested a couple good suggestions at the police board. I think those were incorporated as well.
Yes, they were, yeah.
Okay. So with that addendum, which is coming from the police board, intersection control signage, and the reason why that's on tonight, Norm would like to get going with this, so we can get this signage done. Councillor Hoffert?
Yeah, thank you. Where will they go on the agenda?
That will be under written reports of committees. Just put police board, from the police board, intersection control signage, please. And then if I could have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Thank you, Councillor Hoffert. Seconded by Councillor Moore. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Next, could I have a motion, please, to accept the minutes of the council meeting held on June 10th, 2019. Councillor Nibbs. Seconded by Councillor... I just about looked at Lyle and said Councillor Frank. Councillor Yanis, thank you. He's got a little bit more hair, but not much. Not much.
Hey.
I see bald spots sticking through. Anyway, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under original communications, delegations, and petitions, we have from the Southeast Transportation Planning Committee the minutes of May 28th. Could we have a motion for these, please? Councillor Nibbs, seconded by Councillor Yanish. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Frank, you were in favor of that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Moore, did you have anything to add to that? We've got a couple pages here.
Thank you, Your Worship. The only thing I'd like to remind people is if they see a sign down to phone the ministry or even phone myself, and we'll get it on the list, because those folks only come around a couple times a year. We only have 2 crews in the whole province of Saskatchewan. And coming from Regina just a few minutes ago, I noticed some important ones down on 39. And the only way they'll get back up if somebody reports them. So I will report the ones that I've seen today, and I'd like everybody to do that. Don't matter what kind of sign is to do at the highways. We've got a chance to clean them up and get new ones up. Let's keep an eye on it and get the job done. And lighting as well. Anything that to do with the safety of the highways and railroads. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Moore. And I guess you raised the issue that they took the rumble strips away at Stoughton, and they said if people complain, that comes before safety, I guess?
That's exactly, because I give him a pretty tough time on it. All of a sudden it's done and nobody really knows what happened, and we all talked about it already for 3 years. That particular piece of property sold, and the new guy just said he wasn't going to put up with it, so they come down and they do some kind of a measurement with the sound, and found out it was in fact a little bit of a nuisance, so they filled them in. And so I suggested, why wouldn't you move them back further south? So we'll find out on the next meeting if, because we're going to look into it. I said to him, I think it's really important. We got one of the busiest intersections that probably should have had lights when times were really, really busy. And so they're going to just see if they can do that. They have to do some measurements, and I see nothing wrong with backing it up away from that residence and see if we can put them back in place, so.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because does that mean that Mr. Warner, if he wants to, can get the rumble strips taken away from the bypass? Like, where are we going with that?
Well, that's what we were questioning, and all of us there were asking, well, what happened to them? Who filled them in? And they said, well, they did. And I said, without any warning, you just filled them in? Yeah, he said,
Wow.
we have to be aware of the people that live around them, and that was his answer, so.
Well, that'll be interesting to see where that goes. Councillor Nips and Councillor Yanish?
That was exactly going to be my question, was Warner, didn't he complain about those being too loud at one time?
Well, there was some complaint, but
Yeah.
it never came to my office, but
Yeah.
I heard there was some complaints.
Okay, I was just, because that would be a nightmare if those went away from there. I think that's the only thing saving as many lives as.
Well, that's it, and we've had fatalities there.
I would think the newer they are, the louder they are. As they wear in, they're not so loud, but the effect is still there. So I was surprised just on a whim, what I call just on a whim, but he said, no, we come out and measured it, and in fact, it was greater than what it should be. So then they measured the distance, and so now he's promised me that he's going to look into it to see, because he agreed it was a busy intersection, and I mean.
Yeah, like, would that be over 85 decibels, which in the workplace you have to have hearing protection? Would it be that loud? It doesn't seem that loud.
I'm guessing it probably follows much the same.
I wonder.
rules, but
That's interesting.
I'll know better our next meeting in July. We don't have a meeting in June, so.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Yanish?
Thank you, Worship. This is to Councillor Moore. I was talking to the Stoughton Fire Chief the other day.
Yes.
And he was wondering if you can petition or ask the government to put him in from the north, 47 north. He said there's just as much traffic going north as there or coming from the north as there is the south. And he says there's been quite a few vehicles that have drove right through that also. And there's no houses to worry about on the north.
No.
Yeah.
But he
I will-
mentioned that. He
I'll
said
bring that
it's-
up, and I can't imagine why there wasn't in the first place.
Right.
Doesn't make sense, does it?
Not to him either.
That's a good
Okay.
point.
And of course, he mentioned that he wasn't happy on how one person can change
Yeah.
how that works when they move in, when they were there when he bought the house.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that's another
Councillor
good point.
Ennis.
They were there when he bought the place,
Yeah,
that's right.
That's what the fire chief said.
They were, yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. Councillor Nips?
I had one more question. With those two intersections, the Stoughton one and our bypass, is there anything now that they're almost done this big Virginia bypass and everything to petition to get two overpasses put in there? Is there something we can do as cities or towns like Stoughton or us to say that we would like to get two overpass built?
Well, we can
we get
always
put in there?
petition Councillor Nips, but an overpass now is probably 10 to 15 million.
Which isn't even the cost of one of the 12 they put in at 60
Well,
million apiece.
that's
So
a good point.
I'm
Perhaps,
saying they have the money, so if we put
Yeah.
in now and ask for this at some point, if we ask every year at some point, they'll have to do it, you'd think, right?
Although
just
that-
for safety, how many deaths have we had, how many accidents have we had?
well, yeah, that's a valid point. Although that bypass started at what, 500 million? What's 2 billion and change
Right
now?
in that paper. It's right in that.
So
paper.
another
So-
15 million shouldn't hurt them at all.
Yeah, I guess if they can spend 2 billion on a $500,000 project, perhaps they could get us some overpasses. Is that what you're
Yeah,
suggesting?
just two, right? That's all
Okay.
we want. It's not like we're asking for
Okay, well, we happen to have, as our MLA, the cabinet minister for highways, so we do have her coming. I'm glad you brought that up. I think at the next open council meeting. So we'll have to have a good discussion on that.
excellent, thanks so much.
And I'll make
Super.
note at our next meeting too that we support it. So
Okay,
we're an advisory group. That's what we are.
okay, thank
No
you.
more, no less.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Under original communications, delegations, and petitions, we have the GFL CART report for May 2019. Could we have a motion, please, to accept this report? Thank you, Councillor Broba. Seconded by Councillor Hoffert. Any questions? If not, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Next, under original communications, delegations, and petitions, we have from Larry Mack, a request for special events permit, July 12th, 13th, and 14th. Councillor Broba?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering, where is the event going to be held?
Well, here's the letter. I'll read it. It's fairly brief. Hi Judy, this is a request to approve that you asked for regarding my special occasion permit for our family reunion on July 12th, 13th, 14th. City Clerk, do you know where that might be?
Exhibition Association.
Exhibition.
Okay, then
Exhibition grounds.
acceptance and approval. I have no problem with it there.
Okay, thank you. But you realize the max, there's going to be 10,000 there probably? I think even Councillor Hopper's related to that.
I figured it would be a good one.
Anyway, it'll be a good one. Okay, thank you. Have we got a seconder? Okay, thank you, Councillor Nibs. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Next, under written reports of committees, we have our addendum from the Police Board, the intersection control signage. Now, you have that before you. You've got, what is it, 2042? And then City Clerk even spent the extra time, God bless her heart, and gave you a map with all the little flags so you can have a look at all of the intersections that will now be signed. So what we would like to do is get the motion to send this to the public, to the paper, for 2 weeks, get feedback for 2 weeks. If there's anybody that gets too upset, we'll take it into account, with the intention at our next meeting of passing this and incorporating it into the bylaw and getting the signage done. Councillor Frank.
I just want to say I'm happy to hear that. I wasn't sure if that was going to happen. I certainly am not ready to approve this tonight just because I haven't had a good chance to look at any of this, and I have had a few people who live in the hillside area who have raised some concerns, so that's great that we can let the public kind of see this. I guess the only other question I would have, and while I absolutely appreciate this map, is it possible for our engineering team to do up something that's maybe a little bit more detailed to give to the press that shows where it's going to be a two-way stop versus a four-way stop if we have the time? Or is that too complicated? That might be.
Our city clerk is going on holidays. She's worked so hard.
I know she
so
has, and I really appreciate
We're
it.
actually going to let her go on holidays, but I'm looking over at Richard. Richard, would you or your people have time? Or Rod, would you or your people have time? Okay. Okay, well, maybe.
I mean, if not, then to make sure that this list, if that's too much work, no issue, just
Okay,
make sure this list is public, just so that people can see what the traffic flow is going to look like, because I
Okay,
have had some concerns.
so if we can, gentlemen, to our two managers, if you could maybe work together and see if we could make it a little bit more visible, as Councillor Frank is asking, that would be much appreciated. And Councillor Yanish, you had a question?
Thank you, Worship. We got a grant for half of this.
Yes,
Would it be possible if we just did the whole city and then apply for
we could.
on that, or is that gone through?
Well, we could. That's up to the wish of council. These grants we're getting, I don't know how long we'll get them. They're a little bit of a sore point from the cities of Saskatoon and Regina and Moose Jaw. They're taking part of their speeding ticket revenue from the cameras, you know, those fancy $500,000 or $1 million cameras that they have in those places. They're taking a little cut of that revenue and putting it out to the province. So those cities are not happy. They're lobbying against it. But while that program is in place, we get the benefit of getting grants like this. That's where this $40,000 grant came from. Councillor Nibs?
I do like what Councillor Yanish did, because it's going to be so hard to explain why am I not getting one, why am I getting one.
Like the
if we're
speed
going to do
bumps,
them all, yes.
and that's probably a fair question. So if council wishes, if they're willing to you know, go
It's about
the extra mile, it's
extra.
about 40,000. We could do it all and still apply for the grant.
And then
But
recoup
that'll
it.
come after this. We'd still like the motion here first to advertise this for 2 weeks, and then under the good graces of our two managers present, Rod and Richard, we'll try to make it very clear for our residents, and then we'll hear back from them in 2 weeks. So if you like, we don't have to make that motion tonight. We can all give that some thought on us fronting the money and then hope to get paid back. Councillor Vroba?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to say, I would before talking about fronting the money, I'd like to check into the fact if we could actually be reimbursed if we went ahead, because there's a lot of different projects, especially when you're dealing with provincial money, if you do the project ahead of time, they won't reimburse you, right?
Yes, well, it would be a chance. We can't guarantee it because we would apply. They would probably look favorable because we've already done half, and because of the accidents, SGI, which is a strong partner in this, they would advocate because it saves them money on the accident side, so we would probably get it, but there's no guarantees.
Could we check into it with them though, if we ended up doing it all at one time? Is there a possibility
get
that
a
we would still get
guarantee?
it? I'd rather have that found out first before we even suggest that we spend the money. Because if we just wait a year, we would get the grant again, if we could get the grant, right? Get this done, get the grant, do it. But if there's a chance that we could still get the grant, then I probably would be in favor. But if they're saying no, there's no chance, then I probably wouldn't be.
Yeah, I'm not sure when the grant comes up again, probably next year. And we would probably have a good shot, but again, that's all we could say. We couldn't guarantee. That would be up to the graces of the provincial
Yeah.
government.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Nibbs, then Councillor Frank, then Councillor Moore.
Sorry, for such a little amount of money of $40,000 though, I just think this is going to be a nightmare to why did I get one, why didn't I get one? When you look through it and there's toddler parks that aren't covered and there's busy streets that people are asking for it and we didn't get to them, it's, you know, there's been a lot of people phoning in for a long time, the residents on Nicholson and a bunch of them who aren't getting any. So to me, the $40,000 is irrelevant to the questions we're going to have, and I think, but that's
Okay,
just opinion.
and these are fair comments, and if you like, our public who's listening tonight, I'm sure they'll be giving us feedback as well while we have this posted for 2 weeks, and then hopefully at the next meeting, we can make that decision if council's all right with that. Councillor Frank, thank you.
Did we, when we designed this layout, did they do a map of where they would put all the future ones? Because that's kind of my question through this, is just that traffic flow, and that's where I would probably be in favor of looking at doing it all at once, because then you can kind of see where you're creating kind of that drag strip issue, where you're creating maybe too many hurdles, sort of things like that. So that's actually why I'd probably be more in favor of doing it all at once, or at least having that plan in place to do it all at once, so that we know what the traffic flow through all of those residential areas is going to be like once those are in place. Because I
Yeah,
think that,
okay.
that kind of,
understand.
yeah, it's going to make it a lot easier. People get used to it. They'll know what routes it's going to be the fastest for them to take to get through some of those residential areas. So I actually probably would support doing it all at once as well, but I'm fine with waiting as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Frank. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. So when we put something in the paper, I think it'd be wise to put a diagram in there to
Yeah,
illustrate.
Yeah, that's what our two managers are going to help us out
But-
with and make it more clear, hopefully.
But to illustrate how the right-of-way works, because a lot of people don't understand the right-of-way.
Well, unfortunately,
lots-
you're right. Like you and I mean, we were brought up on the grain farm, and we always knew that at an uncontrolled, which there's many out in the country, you yield to the right. But unfortunately, and Paul, like I say, our police chief, he came from out east, and he said every intersection is signed. And I guess out west in BC, they're all signed as well. So probably because the west has money and the east has money, maybe we're a little bit behind, but
And we float.
and we float, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
Anyway, good
thanks.
points, everyone, and I guess we'll get this posted for 2 weeks and see what happens. Okay, could we have a motion, please, then, that we follow through on this? Councillor Nibbs, seconded by, okay, Councillor Hoffert. Any more questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, next, under executive reports, we have from the city manager the offer to purchase on 1109 and 1111 3rd Street. Now, these are the two small lots beside the old fire hall, to the west of the old fire hall. And the city is looking at trying to sell those, if not, taking the houses out and putting a parking lot in there. With the expansion of the police station having to go east of its current location, there is going to be a requirement for the police parking lot to be moved one lot to the east. This creates parking issues for staff and patrons at City Hall. Council had instructed administration to look at purchasing the properties for sale at 1111 and 1109 3rd Street. Now, this was probably, what, a year and a half, maybe even 2 years ago. The sale price for these properties is $172,000. There's current tax arrears and penalties for the approximate value of $12,000 that would be redeemed to the city through the sale proceeds. These lots will provide appropriate space needed for City Hall parking and will open all of the 11th Street parking to be used by patrons of City Hall and the police station. So the recommendation from management is based on council's instruction to investigate the purchase of these properties. It is recommended that the city proceed with the final offer to purchase 1111 and 1109 3rd Street in the amount of $172,000. So Councillor Frank?
Your worship, yeah, I'd be very much in favor of this, obviously, not just to free up or to give our staff more parking, but I know our staff, there's very little parking in this area, so our staff end up parking in places like Tower Parking Lot or on the street and taking up parking of our downtown core, which should be left for customers who are shopping in that area. So
Good
I
point.
definitely would be very much in favor of that, to remove that issue.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Frank. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure that property's worth $172,000. I'd like to know who negotiates for the city.
That was done through the offices of city manager and the real estate agent. That was the bottom line that he would accept. And I believe, did we not talk at council that that was the maximum number that we would be willing to pay?
I guess I'm a little spoiled because when we were downtown, the VID were picking up those lots for $40,000, $45,000. And I know that's a few years ago, but right now things are pretty slow as well. So I don't imagine they're lined up at the gate to buy it. It just seems that that's a lot of money to, and how quick do we need it? Do we need it right away?
Well, I think the intention, Councillor Moore, was to try to sell those houses, the ones not in too bad a shape, so it could be moved out to a farm or whatever, or even maybe an infill Richard lot. I guess anything would be possible. That would be under Richard's direction, but and then after we get the buildings off, to look at paving and.
Yeah, no, I'm not opposed to what we're doing here. I just hope that we skinnied it down to the best price possible because things are tough. And
No, you're right.
and to put that money out, and if there's not a real purpose.
Again, Councillor Moore, we were hoping to put that building envelope, at least get the pad down for the extension to the police station, which will be going to the east. So that will then, once we do that, take up some of the parking that they use right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nibbs?
Just to Councillor Moore, that's actually about 80,000 because there's 2 lots there, right? And we're getting back the 12, so we're only 160 net on that. So it isn't a whole bunch more than it was back in 1992.
Really?
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Have we got a seconder? Councillor Nibbs? Okay. Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under executive reports, we have from.
I'd like to.
I'm sorry?
The gymnastics club is next, and I'd like to, conflict of interest due to my family's involved in the
Okay, thank you,
gymnastics club.
Councillor Yanish, for that.
I may go watch.
I knew from your svelte figure that you probably were a gymnast, but I didn't know that for sure till now, but thank you. Let it be noted that Councillor Yanish has left the council chambers. So any questions from members of council? We have our manager Richard here this evening. Again, I'll just quickly go over this. Proposal is to convert an existing mixed-use building to a gymnastics studio. The landowner has purchased the property and is currently renovating the west portion of the building for the proposed use. The east portion of the building is being used as a restaurant. Land use issues. The property is short of the required parking stalls to support the proposed use under the current zoning bylaw. It's recommended the council consider additional parking capacity at the city-owned lot that is adjacent to the site. The recommendation, Land Development Services recommends that the development permit application be approved, subject to standard conditions and an allowance for additional parking spaces through a lease on the adjoining city property. The following is a detailed report. You've got the legislative compliance, the official community plan, the zoning bylaw compliance, the notification. All adjoining landowners within 75 meters were notified of the proposed development. The only response was from CPR, which recommends consideration of an acoustic and vibration evaluation of the building. As this is an existing site, it is recommended that no further action is necessary to accommodate railway movements other than a fence that could be placed between the parking lot and the railway right-of-way. Other considerations or concerns recently brought forward about street lighting. The traffic committee is investigating that. A further concern should be relevant, should be a parking area to be established on the vacant lot to the east. As most of the clientele using this business are children, additional parking on the city property may increase the need for extra lighting, so we'll have to look at that as well. And Land Development Services agreed to monitor the parking with the developer, so should a lease for parking area be required, an appropriate number of parking stalls will be made available. An additional parking area could be accessed directly from the developer's property. Should it be accessed directly from the street, a sidewalk as well may be required. So what's the wish of council? Councillor Hoffer?
To be clear, Your Worship, the CPR is not worried that the gymnasts will make too much noise, but the other way around.
That's correct.
Yeah, I can imagine it might affect you if you were on the balance beam. We'll have to check with Councillor Yanish, I guess, when he gets back. And anyway, it's probably a good idea to do that. But yeah, I'm in favor of this. I think we should pass it. It's right in line with what we've talked to the gymnastics club about. I don't see any other alternative, and so I would move that we approve.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hoffer. Councillor Vroba?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would definitely be in favor of seconding this, but also with the parking, the Affinity Place parking is right there, and that end of the parking lot is not usually very full, so it wouldn't be a far walk for anyone that had to drop their child off and then go park the vehicle there, so.
Okay,
Yeah, I
that's a
think
valid
there'll be
point.
plenty of parking.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Frank, then Councillor Moore?
The property that you're speaking to that is city owned, that's the strip of grass between kind of the road and the railroad and that you're.
Yes, going eastwards from the building. Yeah.
And that's all city owned?
That's all owned by the city.
Okay, I had understood that was CP Rail, so that's great. So then that works out fine because we can negotiate those deals then.
I think, Councillor, there's sufficient room on that city property that
sure.
if a portion of that lot was to be leased out or incorporated into this one for extra parking, there'd still be adequate building site there for a building and parking.
Yeah, for sure. No, and that was my biggest concern is that we'd have to deal with CP Rail to use any of that land for parking, but if not, then that makes life a lot easier. So great.
Exactly. Thank you, Councillor Frank. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Worship. The extra lighting is going to be a real pleasure for the people on that street. Not too many weeks ago, I got a phone call from a gentleman there that said he's been after an extra light for 20 years. And the only light he feels he got on that street is a big sign at in the west end. So any kind of lighting will be great because I walked it just to see how dark it is. Well, it's not much different than most of them right there, but this would be a big help.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of the older parts of town are not as well lit as we would like.
Yeah.
But here's an opportunity, maybe at least on that street, we can get it better lit.
Be good, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vroba?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to say, I actually looked into it for lighting on Duncan Road. A lady came and said that when you get to a certain point on Duncan, it's just kind of a non-existent lighting area. And I think also in this area across the street, last year, quite often, the one light seemed to be burnt out. It took 3 times for me to contact SAS Power before the light actually got fixed. And so basically on Duncan, they said it was almost next to impossible to get an extra light put in once the system is in there. But maybe if we're looking at a parking lot, then somehow there we could get a light put near the parking lot or near this building that would help light it up too.
Okay, thank you. How are your lights coming down there? Did they get in yet?
They're all done, all the way down to Woodlawn?
Yes.
Yeah, it was all completed last fall, so it looks great. And I
Awesome.
see people walking like crazy, and I think the Humane Society too is also able to walk all their animals a little bit later now that there's light down there,
Oh,
especially in
that's
the winter.
great. That'll
Yeah.
be a good opportunity for people to walk in the summer, absolutely.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, good, thank you. Any other issues? we've talked so long on this, have we got a motion? I think yes. Yes, Councillor Hoffert, okay. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, next, under executive. Oh, yes, thank you, Councillor Nibbs. He's probably practicing on the balance beam out there, but yeah, please let him back in.
Only if he somersaults back here.
Let it be noted that Councillor Yadish is back. He's got a sweat on his brow. He was probably exercising, but thank you. Okay, next under executive reports, we have from Fire Services, the false alarm policy amending the fees. Now here we're looking at, for the residential, giving the first faux pas a freebie. So January, reoccurring false alarms received within the 12-month period, January to December. There would be one, the first one would be free in case there's issues with that. When I think this is mostly, and Councillor Nibbs, I know you had this happen to you. You were gone, you had a new system, and the painter just accidentally tripped it or something, right?
They were covered it with plastic, and I guess that sets off.
Okay.
But that is my only thing I didn't like is preventable. I don't quite understand preventable when you're painting a house and they plastic it that it would go off. Like, I find that kind of, if they knew that was going to happen, but who would know that would happen would be my question. So I'm still not in favor of getting charged ever for something along that line, but it is what it is,
Right.
and I'll go along with the majority of council on it, but I don't see how that's preventable when something like that happens to anybody, and I wouldn't like to
Yeah.
see anyone get a $300 bill.
Well, you're right, and I think what we're doing here, because we've got the word may, I think we're giving the fire department some discretion. So if they feel it's just an accidental issue that may have happened, they'll give you the individual a break. Otherwise, if they don't feel it is, then you probably won't get the break, so.
Well, if you painted every week and it happened every week,
Yeah,
you
that-
think you might learn from it, but
That might be pushing the envelope.
12 years we lived there and never had it happen before, so I don't think it's a nuisance, but anyways.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vroma?
Thank you, Worship. And just the wording on 2D, it says reoccurring false alarms received within a 12-month period, in brackets, January to December. Is that removing January to December? Adding. I thought when we had our discussion, and maybe I'm incorrect, is that I thought we had said if you had it happen to you in December and then again in January, that's why we had said a 12-month period, but.
Calendar 12 months so that administratively we can handle it. Otherwise,
It would be too much to try and keep track of.
Yeah, so this way it would be like now coming up, it'll be in the
So if it
year
happens-
2020?
Right, so if it happens to me in December of 2019 and January of 2020,
You're good.
they both will be free.
Yeah.
same as
Yeah.
blood sewers.
Okay, we're treating this the same as sewers. Okay, no.
They may look at you sideways if it happens
Yeah.
within a month, but you
It
would
makes
have,
sense,
you would have
though.
an argument.
Perfect, thank you for clarification.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, what's the wish of council? Do we have a motion, Councillor Frank, to go ahead and pass it? Okay, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Yanish. Any further questions? All in favor? Carried, thank you. Next, under executive reports, we have the building permit report for May. Any questions? If not, could we have a motion to accept the building?
Acceptance and approval, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hoffert, seconded by Councillor Yanish. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Under introduction of bylaws this evening, we have none. Public hearings and reports, we have none. Giving notice, we have none. Motions from committee, we have none. Consideration of bylaws, we have none. Inquiries, Councillor Hoffert, please. None, okay. Well, we have an exciting trip tomorrow we're looking forward to, but I guess we don't. Oh, okay, we won't talk about that, okay. Sorry, Councillor, thank you for that, Councillor Brown. Okay,
We're still in open,
okay.
I had some inquiries this week, and I know we talked about it last week and closed about the flowers. And truthfully, I drove around, I looked at a lot of our flowers, and I'm not a gardener by any means, but I did look at a few of them, and they were quite brown. And I even called Councillor Hoffert, and I said, just go look at them, because to me, they're not coming back. And it had rained overnight. Councillor Hoffert said to me they're pretty green. I went and looked at them. They had come back. So some of the ones that I looked at that I thought for sure were not coming back, came back. So I just think people just be patient. If there's an area that you find that you think needs some attention, just give City Hall a call, 634-1800, and they will get that looked at or taken care of. But we do have people on this for work for the city that know a lot more about plants than I do, and they are on top of it. But if
Absolutely.
you notice one that you think isn't getting watered or you think something's happening, then just give a call. We'll make sure we look at it.
Okay,
Because I've been watching those brown ones for 2 weeks and they came back, so.
thank you, Councillor Verba.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
sometimes if they're planted, transplanted, whatever, they have a bit of, I don't know if it's culture shock, but it's shock of some kind.
Yeah, and I'm not saying all of them come back, so I mean, again, my number's 421-7100 for anyone that wants to phone me and tell me which ones didn't come back, but 100%, a lot of the ones that I was looking at, probably at least 80% of them have come back, so.
Good, okay, thank you. Councillor Yanish, nothing this evening, okay. Councillor Frank.
I'll just thank you and Councillor Hofert for your continued efforts to always make our city better, whatever you may be doing tomorrow. That's all we'll say.
God bless you, my
You
son.
betcha.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Davis.
Nothing, Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Worship. I'm only going to mention it so the party out there knows that we are paying attention to the extra hay that's on some of the boulevards. And on that second cut on King Street, there was lots there before they cut it the second time. Now there's a lot more. So I realize, Rod, that sometimes this happens, but I don't think we're going to get away with it without cleaning it up. I don't think we can keep running over what's there and rolling it out behind the lawnmower and calling it a day. So the folks are saying that we're just not finishing our job. The boulevard looks good, but we've got to somehow clean up some of the extra grasses left over. So I'm sure you're on top of it, but I just want to mention it so the public knows that we see what's going on and we bring it to your attention, and then we'll see what we can do. So.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor Moore. I had the privilege and I saw Councillor Frank there on Aboriginal Day, and thank you, Rod, for all of your help to make that day such a success. It was a tremendous day. We had native dancing and it was nice to see. We had some live music and it was very entertaining. And QP, and who were they in partnership with? The what? The newcomers, thank you. They did a great job. They gave free hamburgers to everybody. They were very good. So I'd like to thank everyone involved. It was a very nice day. So with that, could we have a motion, please, to move into committee? Thank you, Councillor Nibbs, seconded by Councillor Moore. All in favor? Carried. Good evening and good night.